That night, I inadvertently saw my wife quietly digging something in the rose garden behind our house. At first, I thought she was just trying to relieve stress by tending to the plants. But then, I heard her voice in the darkness. Friday, on schedule. No, he won't suspect anything. Everything's going to be resolved soon. Trust me. At that moment, my chest tightened. I stood motionless in the darkness, stunned to realize that the woman I had shared a bed with for 35 years had perhaps never been the person I truly knew, and that cold truth compelled me to act immediately. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Is this your first time here? Or have we shared a story before? Drop a quick comment below. Your presence truly matters in this space. Just a quick note. Certain details have been shaped for storytelling and reflection. What matters most is the message about trust betrayal and the choices we make. The evidence sat on my desk like a looming disaster, waiting to break forged invoices, a USB drive, and the jeweled pen I'd given my wife on our 10th anniversary. I picked up the pen, sterling silver engraved with her initials. 25 years ago, I'd saved 3 months to afford it. Nola had cried when she unwrapped it, calling it the most beautiful thing she'd ever owned. Tonight, under the harsh LED of my home office lamp, I could see where she'd used it to forge my signature. The ink matched. The pressure matched. Even the slight rightward slant I'd developed after breaking my wrist in 1998 matched. She'd studied me that carefully. The company, the family, the marriage, all of it is solid. All of it is permanent. I was wrong about a lot of things. My name is Sterling Ellsworth, and at 61 years old, I've spent 35 years building Ellsworth Construction from the ground up here in Phoenix, Arizona. Started with residential repairs and small renovations, the kind of work where you show up at dawn with a thermos and your own tools. Gradually moved into commercial projects, office complexes, retail centers, that mid-rise medical building on Camelback Road, everyone says, looks like a spaceship. I built that. Built all of it with my hands, my reputation, my word. Nola and I got married the same year I incorporated the business. She was 23, fresh out of Arizona State, with an accounting degree and a smile that made me forget I was supposed to be focused on profit margins. We had our daughter Delphina. 2 years later, she's 34. Now serves as CFO of Ellsworth Construction, brilliant with numbers, just like her mother once was. Then came Ezra, our 32-year-old son, who manages our construction projects with the same quiet determination I tried to teach him growing up. Family business. That phrase used to fill me with pride. My children working alongside me, carrying forward something I'd built from nothing. Nola, at home, managing our household with the same precision she'd once applied to balance sheets before she decided to step back from professional accounting to raise the kids. We had dinner together every Sunday, took vacations to Sedona, argued about whether to renovate the kitchen. Normal things, good things, things I thought meant we were happy. The house is quiet tonight. Nola's at her sister's place in Tucson. Or that's what she told me. I don't know anymore what's true and what's performance. The photos on my office wall show our life in careful progression. Wedding day beneath a ramada at Sunset Delphina's college graduation. Ezra's first day on a job site, wearing a hard hat 3 sizes too big. In every picture, Nola's hand rests on my shoulder or clasps my arm. The universal gesture of partnership. Solidarity. How long does it take to build something worth destroying? 35 years, apparently. That's how long it took me to construct everything she decided to dismantle. I should clarify, I'm not a bitter man by nature. I've taken losses before. Projects that went over budget, bids I didn't win, a recession in 2008 that nearly sunk us before Delphina convinced me to pivot toward municipal contracts. I learned early that in construction you adapt or you die. You don't waste time mourning the building that didn't get built. You move on to the next foundation. But this isn't about a lost contract. This is about trust measured in decades, dissolved in weeks. The USB drive contains files Nola created over the past 3 years. Ghost invoices for materials we never ordered, payments to vendors that don't exist, carefully falsified records designed to make it look like I'd been embezzling from my own company. The forgeries are good, professional. She must have practiced my signature hundreds of times to get it that precise. I imagine her sitting at the kitchen table while I slept upstairs, tracing my name over and over on scrap paper until she could reproduce it perfectly. The thought makes my chest tight. There are 14 forged documents in the stack on my desk. 14 separate instances where she imitated my handwriting to authorize fraudulent transactions. The amounts vary, 6,000 here, 12,000 there. Nothing large enough to trigger Delfina's audit alerts, but collectively enough to justify a federal investigation if someone tipped off the right authorities. Someone like Nola. I sat there in the dark earlier tonight, staring at that pen, and felt 35 years crumble into dust. Not just the marriage, though, that's gone obviously, but the certainty I'd carried about my own judgment. I'd built a company that employed 47 people. I'd raised 2 children who became good, capable adults. I'd navigated recession's market shifts, the endless complications of municipal permitting and contractor licensing. And I never saw my own wife plotting to bury me. That's not metaphorical, by the way. 3 weeks ago, I discovered what Nola had been burying in our backyard. Not treasure, not mementos, evidence. USB drives in waterproof cases, printed documents in sealed plastic. A paper trail designed to implicate me in fraud. Hidden 6 inches beneath those small rose pots in her garden. She'd planted those roses 5 years ago. Hybrid teas, she'd said. They need full sun and careful pruning. I'd helped her dig the beds, mixing in compost and soil amendments, never knowing what she'd eventually use that soft earth to hide. The most solid thing I ever built, a 35-year marriage to Nola, was being dismantled from within by the very hands that had once held mine at the altar. She wasn't just leaving me. She was framing me for crimes I never committed, burying evidence in our own backyard, planning to send me to prison so she could take everything. The company, the house, the reputation I'd spent decades building. She wanted me gone, completely, permanently. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from the signs I should have seen. Looking back, I can see the signs I ignored, small, innocent things that should have told me something was terribly wrong. April 2025. Nola started asking questions about my schedule. Not the usual, when will you be home for dinner questions, but precise ones. Which job sites I'd be visiting. What time I'd arrive. How long I'd stay. At the time, I thought she was being considerate, planning her day around mine, the way couples do after decades together. What time will you be at the Henderson site tomorrow? She had asked one morning in September, pouring my coffee with that familiar smile. Just wondering when you'll be home. Probably around 3, I'd said. Why? No reason, just planning dinner. Simple, domestic, harmless. Except now, I know she was mapping my absences, calculating windows of time when she could work undisturbed. In August, Delfina had mentioned something odd during our weekly operations meeting. She'd been reviewing vendor invoices, part of her routine CFO oversight, and flagged a supplier I didn't recognize. "Dad, have you seen this Desert Star Materials invoice?" she'd asked, sliding a printed statement across the conference table. "I don't remember approving this supplier." I'd glanced at it. Gravel and aggregate delivery. The signature at the bottom looked like mine, close enough that I assumed I'd signed it during one of those marathon approval sessions where you initial 40 documents without reading every line. Must have been during the Tempe project setup, I'd told her. We brought on a few new vendors that month. Delfina had frowned slightly the way she does when numbers don't quite reconcile, but she'd nodded and moved on to the next item on the agenda. I should have paid more attention to that frown. Delfina inherited her mother's gift for patterns she sees, discrepancies the way other people see colors. But I was busy. The Tempe commercial development was running 3 weeks behind schedule. Ezra was managing the site crew, and they'd hit complications with the foundation pour. I had bigger problems than a vendor invoice I couldn't quite remember signing. Then in October, Nola asked for $5,000, said Ezra needed car repairs, something about the transmission failing on his truck. "Can we help him out?" she'd asked over breakfast, her hand resting gently on my arm. "He's embarrassed to ask you directly, you know how proud he is." Of course I'd agreed. What father wouldn't? I wrote the check that afternoon, handed it to Nola, never thought about it again. Until 3 weeks ago, when I casually mentioned it to Ezra during a site walk, asked how his truck was running. "That's fine," he'd said, genuinely confused. "Why, the transmission repair. Your mom said..." Dad, I never had transmission problems. My truck's got 40,000 miles on it." That conversation happened in my office parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember the exact moment, Ezra standing there in his dusty work boots, hard hat under his arm, looking at me like I'd lost my mind. And I'd laughed it off. Said Nola must have gotten confused, maybe it was for something else. But the seed was planted. $5,000. Where did it go? You know how easy it is to ignore what you don't want to see. I was a master at it. Every inconsistency, every strange question, every moment where Nola's behavior didn't quite match the woman I thought I knew, I rationalized it all away. Stress, menopause, the normal friction of a long marriage. I told myself we were fine. We were always fine. Until the first Monday night in December. I woke around 10 o'clock to faint sounds from downstairs. Not alarming sounds, just movement. The soft scrape of the sliding glass door opening to the backyard. I assumed Nola couldn't sleep, maybe getting some air. I rolled over, closed my eyes. Then I heard the distinct clink of ceramic on stone. Our bedroom window overlooks the backyard. I got up, moved to the glass, looked down. Nola stood in the garden area near the back fence, bathed in desert moonlight, holding one of her small decorative rose pots. She was wearing dark clothes, not pajamas, but jeans and a long-sleeve shirt, practical clothes for outdoor work. She set the pot down at a very specific location, adjusted it slightly, stepped back to examine the placement from multiple angles. Then she knelt beside it with a small hand trowel. I watched her dig. Not casually, not the way someone plants flowers on a Sunday afternoon. This was precise, methodical. She measured the depth with her hand, removed something from her jacket pocket, I couldn't see what, and placed it carefully in the hole, covered it, smoothed the soil, positioned the rose pot directly over the spot. She stood, brushed dirt from her knees, checked the placement 3 more times before picking up her tools and walking back toward the house. The whole operation took maybe 8 minutes. She stood up, brushed the desert dirt from her knees, and walked back toward the house. I quickly moved back to the bed, closing my eyes and pretending to be asleep. I heard the sliding door lock and then her quiet footsteps entering the bedroom. "Nola," I murmured, feigning a voice thick with sleep as I turned over. "What were you doing out there?" She paused by the bedside, her voice remarkably calm, carrying that familiar gentle warmth. "Just planting a small rose pot, Sterling. Every Monday at 10 p.m., planting and tending to them at this hour is very good for them. Go back to sleep." At that moment, I thought it was just her hobby, a way to clear her mind. "Maybe stress is getting to her too," I whispered to myself after she slid under the covers. But when I dug it up later, the truth buried beneath those small pots made my heart stop. Except I knew even then that her answer was a performance, because asking any further meant acknowledging that something was terribly wrong. And I'd spent 8 months not acknowledging that. My hands gripped the edge of the blanket in the dark, watching the ceiling, while she drifted off, her breathing, even and calm. That wasn't gardening. That was execution. And the woman who had just lied to my face with a soft smile, careful, calculating, moving through the dark with the confidence of someone who'd planned every step, that woman looked like a complete stranger. Not the person I'd held at the altar 35 years ago. Not the mother who'd raised our children, but someone I'd never met. Someone capable of things I couldn't yet imagine. I lay there for hours after she fell asleep, and with every passing second, the distance between us grew wider. I didn't know it then, but I'd just witnessed the first move in a game that would cost me everything. The next morning, I drove straight to Delfina's office instead of my own. I needed to tell someone what I'd seen, and my daughter had always been the one who saw things clearly. Ellsworth Construction occupies a renovated warehouse in East Phoenix, all exposed brick and industrial windows. Delfina's office sits at the far end of the second-floor glass walls that let her see the entire accounting department. She looked up when I knocked, and whatever expression I was wearing made her stand immediately. "Close the door," she said. I did. "I saw your mother in the garden last night." I started feeling ridiculous even as I said it. Around 10 o'clock, she was burying something under one of her rose pots. I expected Delfina to tell me I was overreacting, to suggest Nola was just planting bulbs or doing some late-night stress gardening. Instead, her face went very still. "Dad," she said quietly, "I need to show you something. I've been waiting for the right time to bring this up." "What do you mean the right time?" My chest tightened. "How long have you known something was wrong?" 3 weeks, maybe longer." She pulled open her desk drawer and extracted a yellow folder, thick with papers. When she laid it on the desk between us, I saw the tab label, Desert Star Materials Anomalies. "I found the first invoice 3 weeks ago," Delfina said, opening the file to show highlighted printouts. "No approval signature in the master file. I thought it was an admin error, something Saskia missed when scanning documents." Saskia Kent, our office secretary, handles invoice processing. She's been with us for 8 years, meticulous to a fault. Then I found 3 more, Delphina continued. All from the same company, all missing your signature in the approval chain. She spread 4 invoices across the desk. Each one bore my signature at the bottom, the familiar slant the way I cross my T's, but the digital approval trail showed no record of me ever seeing them. Desert Star Materials doesn't exist, Dad. The address on their letterhead is a vacant lot in Tempe. No business license on record with the state. No contractor credentials. I spent 2 weeks checking. I stared at the invoices. Aggregate delivery, concrete supplies, rebar shipment, all for the Henderson site project, all dated between August and November. Total value $47,000. Someone forged these, I said. Yes. And you think? I don't know what to think, Delphina interrupted, but her eyes said otherwise. That's why I've been waiting. I needed more than suspicion before I came to you with this. We sat in her office for another hour cross-referencing dates. Every Desert Star invoice corresponded to a day when I'd been off-site for extended periods. Days Nola would have known I'd be gone. Days she'd specifically asked about. We need to document everything, I said finally. But we don't tell your mother, not yet. Delphina nodded. The alliance formed in that moment felt both necessary and heartbreaking, father and daughter, building a case against the woman who'd raised her. Tuesday through Thursday became an exercise in surveillance. At home, I observed Nola the way I'd evaluate a faulty foundation, looking for cracks, measuring inconsistencies. She took phone calls in the bathroom with the door locked. When I asked casual questions about her day, her answers came too quickly, too rehearsed. How was your day, Nola? I'd asked Tuesday over dinner. It's fine, the usual. She'd looked up from her plate, suddenly defensive. Why are you asking? Just asking. But I wasn't just asking. I was watching the way her shoulders tensed, the way she checked her phone every 15 minutes, the way she seemed to be calculating something I couldn't see. We were building a case against my own wife, the way I'd built every foundation in Phoenix, carefully, methodically, one piece of evidence at a time. At the office, Delphina continued her forensic accounting. Wednesday afternoon, she called me. Dad, I found another one, dated last Monday, the day before you saw her in the garden. Another invoice, another $8,000, another piece of the pattern. By Thursday, we had 7 fraudulent invoices totaling $63,000, all processed through accounts payable in the past 4 months, all corresponding to days when I'd been conveniently absent. I sat across from Nola at dinner Thursday night, watching her cut her chicken with precise, delicate movements, and realized I was dining with a stranger who knew all my secrets. She knew my schedule, my signature, my blind spots. She'd studied me for 35 years, learning exactly where to strike. You're quiet tonight, she said. Tired, long week. You work too hard. Her hand reached across the table to touch mine, and I had to force myself not to pull away. You should rest more. The concern in her voice sounded genuine. Maybe it was genuine. Maybe she could compartmentalize that, thoroughly loving me while simultaneously destroying me. I went to bed early that night, claiming exhaustion. Nola joined me an hour later, settling into her side of the mattress with a contented sigh. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathing, even out waiting. Around 9:30, she stirred. I kept my eyes closed, my breathing steady and deep. She slipped out of bed, padded across the carpet to the bathroom. The lock clicked. I counted to 30, then moved quietly to the bathroom door. Her voice came through barely above a whisper. Friday, right on schedule. Pause. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Another pause, longer this time. It's handled, trust me. The call ended. Water ran in the sink. She was covering the sound, establishing an alibi for why she'd locked herself in the bathroom. I was back in bed before she opened the door, eyes closed, breathing measured. She slid back under the covers beside me. I felt her studying my face in the darkness, checking to make sure I was truly asleep. Then she rolled over, and within minutes her breathing steadied into genuine sleep. I lay there until dawn, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Friday, right on schedule. Her voice had been ice-cold, businesslike, nothing like the woman I'd married. Whatever she was planning had a deadline, and I had less than 24 hours to figure out what Friday meant. But Friday wasn't the deadline I needed to worry about. It was the following Monday. Friday came and went without incident. Nola went to the grocery store, attended her book club, came home, and made dinner like nothing was happening. Whatever had been scheduled, I never saw it. Maybe the phone call had been about something else entirely, or maybe she'd seen through my pretense of sleep and adjusted her timeline. But the following Monday night, I didn't wait for sounds to wake me. I stayed awake watching the bedroom window like a hunter in a blind. 10 o'clock arrived with desert precision. Nola stirred beside me. I kept my breathing steady, deep the rhythm of genuine sleep I'd practiced all week. She slipped out from under the covers, moved to the closet, changed into dark clothes. This time, I tracked every movement through half-closed eyes. She left the bedroom carrying something wrapped in cloth, another small rose pot identical to the first. I moved to the window. The backyard spread below me in silver moonlight, the Palo Verde tree casting skeletal shadows across the flagstone patio. Nola walked to a different location this time, closer to the tree itself, and set the pot down with careful precision. She knelt, pulled the hand trowel from her jacket pocket, and began to dig. This isn't gardening, I thought. This is ritual. This is planning. She measured the hole with her palm, checking depth, reached into her other pocket and extracted a small rectangular object from this angle. I couldn't tell what it was wrapped in plastic. She placed it in the hole, covered it with soil, positioned the rose pot directly over the burial site. Then she stood and checked the placement, once, twice, 3 times. She checked it 3 times. 3, like a surgeon counting instruments before closing an incision. In 35 years, Nola was never this careful about anything. She was spontaneous, impulsive, the kind of woman who rearranged furniture on a whim and planted flowers wherever they looked pretty. This methodical precision belonged to someone else entirely. She walked back to the house, and I was in bed before she reached the bedroom door. Whatever she was burying it was important enough to repeat, important enough to hide. And if she was following a weekly pattern, there would be more. I waited until her breathing steadied into sleep. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Delfina. Second burial, confirmed. Same time, different location. Meeting tomorrow morning. Her response came 30 seconds later. I'll be there. But I needed one more person. Tuesday morning at 6 o'clock, I called Ezra. Dad. His voice was thick with sleep. What's wrong? I need you to come by the house early. We need to talk about Henderson. In this early, is everything okay? Just come, before your mother wakes up. Silence on the line long enough that I thought he might refuse. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said finally. He arrived at 6:45, looking exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. I met him at the door and led him to the kitchen, put coffee on, kept my voice low. This isn't about Henderson, I said once we were seated. I'm sorry for lying, but I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm. Ezra's jaw tightened. What's going on? Your mother has been burying things in the backyard. 2 Monday nights in a row, 10 o'clock exactly under her rose pots. I don't know what she's hiding, but Delfina found fraudulent invoices at the office, and I think they're connected. I expected shock, denial. Instead, Ezra went very pale and pulled his phone from his pocket. How long? He asked quietly. How long has this been happening? The burial's 2 weeks, but the invoices go back months. Ezra scrolled through his phone, his hands unsteady. Then he turned the screen toward me. Text messages, dozens of them, all from Nola. Mom had some heart palpitations today. Seeing Dr. Gable tomorrow. Don't tell your father he has enough stress. Mom test results came back. Nothing conclusive. More appointments scheduled. Mom's shortness of breath getting worse. Please don't worry, Dad, with this. I'll handle it. The messages went back 6 months. June, July, August, right around the time the first Desert Star invoices appeared. Mom's been texting me about her heart problems for 6 months. Ezra said, his voice hollow. She made me promise not to tell you. Said you had too much on your plate, that the business stress was already breaking you down, that she didn't want to add to your burden. My throat went tight. What heart problems? Your mother's heart is fine. I know that now. His eyes were red-rimmed, whether from exhaustion or tears I couldn't tell. But she sent me appointment reminders, test results. She even sent me a photo of a prescription bottle. I looked it up later. It's a real cardiac medication. I thought she was dying, Dad. The kitchen clock ticked in the silence between us. She used me, Ezra whispered, kept me distracted, worried, guilty. Every time I started to notice something odd at work, a missing signature, a vendor I didn't recognize, I'd get another text about chest pains or dizziness, and I'd forget everything else. I watched my son's hands shake as he scrolled through his mother's lies, and I realized she'd been destroying both of us simultaneously. While she planted evidence in the backyard, she planted fear in our son's heart. While she forged my signature, she forged a medical crisis to weaponize Ezra's love. Dad, I hid it from you for 6 months because I thought Mom was dying. His voice broke. I'm sorry. I reached across the table and gripped his shoulder. This isn't your fault. But the weight of what Nola had done settled over us like concrete setting. She hadn't just betrayed her husband, she'd manipulated her own child, turned his devotion into a tool for her conspiracy, made him an unwitting accomplice through manufactured compassion. If she could do that to her own son, what else was she capable of? We were about to find out exactly how deep this went. We didn't waste time on comfort or apologies. Within 10 minutes, the three of us were sitting in my study with the door closed, mapping out exactly how we'd unearth my wife's secrets. Nola's spa appointment, Delphina said, pulling out her phone to check the calendar. Tuesday mornings 9:30, she's had that standing reservation for 2 years. 2 years. The realization hit me like cold water. How long had this Tuesday routine been running? And more importantly, how long had it been cover for something else entirely? She'll be gone 3 hours minimum, Delphina continued. That's our window. We dig up both rose pots, photograph everything, analyze whatever's inside, and put it all back exactly as it was. I'll dig them up, I said. You handle the analysis. Ezra, you go to work like nothing's happening. Ezra looked up from his coffee, still pale. Dad, what if she comes back early? What if she knows? She won't know, Delphina said with the certainty of someone who'd been tracking patterns for weeks. Mom's appointment is 90 minutes. Then she always has lunch at that cafe on Camelback. She's never home before 1 o'clock. The way my daughter said it, clinical detached, like she was analyzing a stranger's schedule instead of her mother's, told me how far we'd already traveled from normal family dynamics. We weren't planning a surprise party. We were planning a covert operation against the woman who'd raised us. What do we do after? Ezra asked. Once we know what she buried, depends on what we find, I said. But we document everything, photos, measurements, exact locations. We need evidence that will hold up. Hold up where? Ezra's voice cracked slightly. Are we talking about police lawyers? No. I met my son's eyes. I don't know yet, but whatever we find, we do this right. Delphina nodded. Agreed. No confrontation until we understand the full scope. 3 hours to dismantle 35 years of marriage. At 8:45, Nola emerged from the bedroom dressed in yoga pants and a lightweight jacket, her spa bag over her shoulder. She looked relaxed, refreshed, like a woman without a care in the world. I sat at the breakfast table with the newspaper spread in front of me, not reading a single word. Ezra stood by the coffee maker, refilling his mug for the 3rd time, his hands remarkably steady considering the circumstances. Good morning, Nola said brightly, kissing the top of my head as she passed. You're up early, Ezra. Couldn't sleep, he said, which was true enough. You work too hard, just like your father. She poured herself a glass of water, hummed something tuneless while she drank it. I'll be back around 1. Do we need anything from the store? No, we're fine, I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. Enjoy your spa day. She smiled the same smile I'd loved for 35 years and crossed back to kiss my cheek. Love you. The words stuck in my throat, but I managed them. Love you too. I watched her walk to the front door, watched her check her reflection in the hallway mirror, watched her grab her keys from the hook, every movement familiar, domestic, ordinary. How many of those Tuesday spa appointments were actually spa appointments? How long had I been living with a stranger who wore my wife's face? The front door closed. I heard her car start in the driveway. Ezra and I sat in silence until the sound of her engine faded down the street. I need to go, Ezra said, finally setting his mug in the sink. He looked at me, his expression somewhere between grief and determination. Dad, whatever you find, I'll text you, I promised. He nodded and left through the garage. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the empty street, listening to the house settle into silence. The breakfast dishes sat on the counter. Nola's coffee mug, still half full, rested beside the sink. Normal Tuesday morning debris. At 9:40 exactly, Delphina's car pulled into the driveway. She came through the back door carrying her laptop bag and a small hard case equipment box. I recognized from her office the kind she used for secure document transport. She's gone, Delphina said. We have 3 hours. Let's move. I started toward the garage, but she caught my arm. Dad, are you sure about this? Her voice dropped lower, more vulnerable than her tactical planning had allowed earlier. Once we dig those up, we can't unknow what's inside. We can't go back to pretending everything's fine. I thought about the forged invoices, the fake heart condition texts, the midnight burials, the woman who'd kissed my cheek this morning and said she loved me while planning God knows what. We crossed that line the moment I saw her in the garden, I said. I'm sure. Hand me the gloves. She pulled a pair of gardening gloves from her bag, and I walked to the garage. The garden spade hung on the wall, where it always did next to the rake and hedge trimmers, tools I'd used for 30 years to maintain the yard Nola and I had built together. I lifted the spade, felt its familiar weight. Every marriage has secrets. I was about to excavate mine with a garden spade. I walked back through the garage and into the morning sunlight. Delphina stood at the edge of the flagstone patio, looking toward the rose garden, where 2 decorative pots sat exactly where Nola had placed them. Which one first? She asked. The one closest to the fence. That was the first burial. I watched my own car pull away when Ezra left for work. I watched Nola's empty parking space. I watched my daughter pull out her phone to start documenting. Then I walked toward the roses, shovel in hand, and knelt in the dirt where my wife had knelt 2 weeks ago. 35 years of marriage driving away in a silver sedan. And here I was, about to dig up more than rose pots. What we found buried in that dirt would shatter everything I thought I knew. The shovel bit into Arizona dirt, exactly where I'd watched my wife kneel 2 weeks ago. And every scrape felt like watching 35 years of building crumble to the ground. The soil was loose from recent planting. Nola hadn't packed it down, which made the digging easier than I'd expected. I worked carefully, Delphina standing beside me with her phone out, documenting every stage. The small rose pot sat to one side, its dynamic red petals already wilting in the morning sun. But as the dirt gave way and the shovel struck metal, the absolute truth uncovered beneath those small pots left me completely paralyzed and stunned. About 15 centimeters down, the shovel struck something solid with a distinct clink of metal on glass. There, I said, my voice rougher than intended. I hit something. Careful, Delphina warned. We need to preserve whatever's inside. I set the shovel aside and knelt closer, using my gloved hands to clear away dirt. The object emerged gradually, a standard beer bottle, but wrapped so thoroughly in clear waterproof plastic bags that it looked like a museum artifact being prepared for long-term storage. Multiple layers sealed with thick packing tape at both ends. And she wrapped it like she was protecting treasure. I said, brushing the last of the soil away. Delphina crouched beside me, examining it without touching. She wanted this to last, to stay intact for months, maybe years. The implications settled over us like cold fog. This wasn't evidence Nola was planning to destroy. This was evidence she was planning to preserve and eventually discover when the timing suited her narrative. Hey, let's get it inside, Delphina said. We carried it to the kitchen table, where natural morning light streamed through the windows. Delphina pulled latex gloves from her equipment case, her forensic accountant instincts kicking in, and began carefully unwrapping the outer layers of plastic. We photograph every step, she said, more to herself than to me. Document the seal integrity, the wrapping method, everything. I watched my daughter work with clinical precision, and part of me wondered when this had become her expertise, when she'd learned to treat her own mother's conspiracy like a corporate fraud investigation. The final layer of plastic came away, revealing the bottle itself. Delphina unscrewed the cap and tilted it carefully over the table. Documents slid out, first rolled tight and secured with a rubber band. Then a small Ziploc bag containing what looked like a chunk of gray concrete. Business cards scattered across the table. And finally, something wrapped in white tissue paper that clinked against the glass. Delphina spread the documents flat. I recognized the letterhead immediately: Desert Star Materials LLC, the company that didn't exist. Dad, look at this signature, she said, pointing to the bottom of an invoice. It's yours, but it's not yours. She was right. The signature read Sterling Ellsworth in my handwriting, but something about the spacing was wrong. The E in Ellsworth slanted too far right. The capital S had a flourish I'd stopped using in the 90s. This is from October, I said, checking the date. Henderson Plaza Project. I never approved this supplier. None of them are real, Delphina said, spreading out 3 more invoices. Desert Star Materials, the company that doesn't exist. But these business cards... She held up a card bearing my name, Ellsworth Construction's contact information, and a logo that was almost correct but subtly wrong. The font was serif instead of sans serif, the color slightly darker. Someone could flash this at a supply yard. Delphina said, pick up materials sign with your name, and the vendor would never question it. You ever give someone a gift that comes back to destroy you? That's what love becomes when it curdles into something else. I picked up the Ziploc bag containing the concrete sample. Even through the plastic, I could feel it was wrong, too light, too crumbly. I opened the seal and pinched a fragment between my fingers. It disintegrated into powder. "This concrete sample, it's garbage," Delphina said, examining it herself. "This would fail inspection in a week, maybe days." "Henderson Plaza is a commercial medical building," I said slowly, the implications crystallizing. If someone used substandard concrete and blamed it on my company, lawsuits, liability, potential criminal negligence charges. Delphina's voice was flat, emotionless. "She wasn't just stealing money, Dad. She was building a case to destroy your reputation." My hands started shaking. "There's one more thing," Delphina said quietly, reaching for the tissue-wrapped object at the bottom of the pile. She peeled back the tissue carefully, revealing what lay inside. A jeweled blue ballpoint pen. Sterling silver barrel sapphire cap, my initials engraved near the clip. "Dad," Delphina said, her voice suddenly careful, gentle. "Dad, look at this pen. Do you recognize it?" I couldn't speak for a moment, just stared at the pen lying there on the kitchen table, among the forged documents and fake business cards. "That's," my voice cracked. "That's the pen I gave her." I remembered the day perfectly. We'd been married 10 years, still building the business money tight. But I'd wanted to give her something special. Something that said, I saw her, valued her. The salesman had shown me a dozen pens before I found the one with the sapphire cap, the one that reminded me of her eyes. She'd cried when she opened the box, told me it was the most thoughtful gift I'd ever given her, promised she'd treasure it forever. "She used it to practice your signature," Delphina said, pulling up magnified photos of the forged invoices on her phone. "The ink matches. Every forged invoice we found, every fraudulent signature, the ink composition, the pressure points, everything matches this pen." I picked up that pen with shaking hands, remembering the joy on her face when I gave it to her, and felt 35 years collapse into dust. The most thoughtful gift I'd ever given her. She'd treasured it all right. Treasured it as the perfect tool to forge my signature, to authorize fraudulent transactions, to build evidence that would destroy me. "She was already planning this," I said. "Back then, 1991. "We don't know that," Delphina said, but her voice lacked conviction. "If the first bottle held physical lies, the second bottle, larger, buried deeper near the Palo Verde tree, held something far worse, digital proof." We left the anniversary pin on the kitchen table and crossed the yard to the second rose pot. The Arizona sun climbed higher, and I checked my watch, 10:35, 2.5 hours before Nola was scheduled to return. "This one's deeper," I said, driving the shovel into soil that was more compacted, harder to penetrate. She spent more time on this burial. Delphina photographed every stage as I worked. 6 inches, 8 inches, 10. Finally, at nearly 12 inches deep, the shovel struck glass with a muted thunk. The bottle was larger this time, a wine bottle instead of beer, wrapped in the same meticulous layers of waterproof plastic. But when Delphina unwrapped it at the kitchen table, we found something beyond the rolled documents. "Dad, there's a USB drive," she said, extracting a small black thumb drive from its own sealed waterproof electronics pouch, complete with desiccant packets to prevent moisture damage. In a waterproof case with moisture absorbers. I stared at it lying on the table. The level of preservation, the professional-grade protection, the deliberate burial depth spoke to long-term planning. "She preserved it like evidence for a trial," I said, "because that's exactly what she's planning." We moved to my home study. Delphina pulled out her laptop, running some kind of forensic software I didn't recognize, and plugged in the USB drive with gloved hands. The drive populated slowly. Folders appeared on the screen: emails, bank_statements, audio_files, and one Word document titled insurance_claim_strategy_final.docx. "Dad, there are emails here going back 8 months, Delphina said, scrolling through the first folder. "Conversations you never had. Look at this one, supposedly between you and a cement supplier in August, discussing substandard materials to cut costs." I leaned over her shoulder, reading words I'd never written in an email thread that looked completely authentic. My email address, the company's signature block, technical language I would use. But none of it was real. Watching those fabricated emails scroll past was like reading my own autopsy report while still alive, every word a lie, every timestamp a nail in my coffin. "The bank statements," Delphina said, opening another folder. "These show payments from Ellsworth Construction to offshore accounts. Accounts in your name that I've never seen in any of our legitimate records. Because they don't exist, I said. She created them, or she's planning to create them, or both. Delphina's voice had gone flat clinical. Some of these could be entirely fabricated. Some could be real accounts she opened using your information, with small deposits to establish history. My hands gripped the edge of the desk. Play one of those audio files, I said. I need to hear what she made me say. Delphina hesitated, then clicked on the first file, audio_01_conference_call.mp3. My voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. We can reduce material costs by 15% if we cut the cement ratio and substitute cheaper aggregate. The inspectors won't notice if we time the pour correctly. That's your voice, Delphina said quietly. But those aren't your words. I never said that. I would never say that. My voice sounded hollow even to myself. That's not how is that possible? AI voice cloning, deepfake audio. Delphina stopped the playback. If she had enough source material, recorded phone calls, videos, anything with your voice software can generate new speech that sounds exactly like you. I thought about all the family videos we'd made over 35 years. Every birthday, every anniversary, every casual conversation Nola might have recorded without me noticing. We need an expert, I said. Someone who can prove this is fake. I called Merritt Wolf, a 48-year-old audio forensics expert I'd worked with on a previous construction dispute, where we'd needed to verify the authenticity of recorded contractor conversations. He had a reputation for finding truth in sound waves, and he lived 20 minutes away in Tempe. I can be there in an hour, Merritt said when I explained what we'd found. Don't delete anything. Don't copy anything. Just leave it exactly as it is. He arrived at noon carrying 2 hard cases of analysis equipment, tall, lean, with wire-rimmed glasses, and the methodical manner of someone who spent his life listening to things other people couldn't hear. Delphina handed him the laptop. Merritt loaded the audio files into his software, and for the next 45 minutes, we watched waveforms and spectral patterns scroll across his screen in colors I didn't understand. This is definitely AI generated, Merritt said finally. Spliced from multiple source recordings of your voice. Very sophisticated work. Whoever created this had access to professional-grade voice synthesis software and significant source material. But here's the interesting part. He clicked a few buttons isolating a section of the audio file and amplifying specific frequencies. Listen to this background frequency at 2.4 kilohertz, he said, playing a filtered version of the recording. Beneath my fabricated voice discussing construction fraud, I heard something else, a distinct high-pitched vocalization, almost like a bird cry, but more complex, repeated twice in the background. That's an African gray parrot, Merritt said, looking up at me. The person who made this recording was in the same room as that bird when they generated the audio file. I can verify the species from the vocalizations pattern. It's highly distinctive. The parrot, Pepper, in Nola's bedroom. The room I hadn't entered in months. Delphina's eyes met mine across the desk. Mom's parrot, she said. The one in her bedroom. Merritt looked between us, professional and careful. If you have an African gray parrot in this house, then whoever created these files was working in the same room where that bird lives. The background frequency is unmistakable. Nola's bedroom, where she kept Pepper, her African gray parrot she'd owned for 2 years. The room she'd made private territory, claiming she needed her own space, her own sanctuary. The same 2 years she'd been planning this. And we still had one more piece of evidence to find. After Merritt left, Delphina asked the question that terrified me most. How long has she actually been planning this? We returned to the study. Delphina pulled up the Ellsworth Construction email server, something she had administrative access to as CFO. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, pulling logs I didn't even know existed. I'm checking for unauthorized access to your corporate email, she said. If Mom was creating those fake emails, she'd need to study your communication style, your templates, your phrasing, your signature blocks. The server logs populated on her dual monitors, lines of data, timestamps, IP addresses. She filtered by my email account, sorted by location. Then she stopped. Dad, this IP address. She pointed to a string of numbers that appeared dozens of times in the log. It's our home network. Someone's been logging into your corporate email from home for 8 months. I leaned closer, reading the dates. April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. The access pattern showed systematic downloading invoice templates, supplier correspondence contract formats. 8 months. My voice sounded distant. But she only met Alonzo 6 months ago? You said the first time you saw them together was in June. Delfina turned to face me, her expression hard as granite. Exactly. She didn't plan this with him. She planned it first, then found him. Her voice went cold. Whatever relationship she has with Alonzo Trent, it's not the origin of the conspiracy. It's a tool. She recruited him. The realization settled like ice in my chest. I'd been thinking of Nola as Alonzo's victim, a woman seduced by a casino owner, manipulated into betraying her husband. But the timeline told a different story. She'd conceived this plan, independently spent 2 months preparing, then deliberately sought out an accomplice. She needed someone who could create offshore accounts, Delfina continued. Someone with connections to move money. Alonzo Trent owns Desert Star Casino. He has exactly those resources. How do you live with someone for 35 years and never know they're capable of something like this? I checked my watch 12:50. Nola would be back by 1 o'clock. We had 10 minutes, maybe 15 if she stopped for groceries. We need a second opinion on that concrete, I said. Someone who can verify it's fraudulent. I called Hayes Barker, our Henderson Plaza site engineer, and asked him to come by urgently. He lived 15 minutes away and arrived at 1:10, still wearing his work boots and high-vis vest, looking concerned. Everything okay, Sterling? He asked as I led him to the garage. I need you to look at something. I handed him the concrete sample from the first bottle. Hayes examined it with immediate professional skepticism, turning it over in his hands, crumbling a fragment between his fingers. This is garbage concrete, he said after maybe 30 seconds. Maybe suitable for a garden path or decorative work, but never for structural applications. The aggregate ratio is wrong. The binding is weak. This would fail any commercial building inspection. That sample was in a bottle labeled Henderson Project, I said. Hayes looked up sharply. We didn't use this. I would never approve this material. Someone's trying to make it look like we did. Delfina had followed us to the garage with her laptop. Hayes, have you ever heard of a company called Desert Star Materials? Hayes' face changed. Wait, Desert Star Materials? I know that name. He set the concrete sample down on the workbench. They contacted me 5 months ago, July, maybe offering cheap materials for Henderson Plaza. Really cheap. Too cheap. I looked into them, no proper licensing, no references. I declined immediately and emailed Sterling about it. I never got any email from you about them, I said. Hayes frowned. I definitely sent it. I remember because the sales rep was pushy, kept calling my cell. I wanted you to know in case they tried to contact you directly. Delfina's fingers were already moving across her keyboard, pulling up the email server logs again. She filtered by Hayes' email address, searched for mentions of Desert Star. Dad, look at this. The screen showed a single entry. From hayes.ackbarker@ellsworthconstruction.com to sterling.ellsworth@ellsworthconstruction.com. Subject, warning, Desert Star. Material suspicious contact. Date, July 18th, 2025, 3:03 p.m. Deleted IP192.168.1.47. Home network. Hayes' email arrived in your inbox, Delfina said quietly. Then it was deleted 16 minutes later, from home. I stared at the timestamp, 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon in July. I would have been at the Tempe site that day gone until at least 6. Nola would have been home alone, sitting at our kitchen table, monitoring my email, watching for threats to her plan, erasing evidence in real time. Someone intercepted it, Hayes said, reading over my shoulder. Someone with access to your email was sanitizing your communications. I thought about all the times I'd casually mentioned my schedule at dinner, all the passwords I'd written in our shared household notebook, every small trust that becomes a weapon in the wrong hands. How many other emails did I never see? I asked. Delfina ran another search filtering for deletions from the home IP address over the past 8 months. 23 emails, 23 separate communications deleted from my inbox before I ever read them. Warnings from vendors, questions from site managers, a message from our insurance company requesting verification of a claim I'd never filed. All erased, all sanitized, all vanished into the same digital void that had swallowed Hayes' warning. She's been monitoring everything, Delfina said. Every email, every communication, every potential threat to her plan. She's been controlling your information flow for months. We had 15 minutes before Nola was due home, and there was one room left to search the bedroom she'd made her private sanctuary 2 years ago. Hayes left through the front door, promising discretion. Delphina and I stood in the hallway outside Nola's room. The door was closed as it always was. A brass sign hung at eye level, "Please respect my privacy." "When was the last time you were in here, Dad?" Delphina asked. 2 years. She said she needed her own space after... I tried to remember the excuse. I can't even recall what reason she gave. Something about meditation and personal boundaries. Delphina turned the handle and pushed the door open. The room was immaculate. Every surface gleamed. Nola's makeup sat arranged on the vanity in perfect rows, lipsticks by color, brushes by size. Her closet hung color-coded from whites to blacks. The desk near the window had 3 locked drawers, a laptop docking station, and a filing organizer with labeled tabs. "This isn't a bedroom," Delphina said, moving to the desk. "It's an operations center. Look at this filing system." She was right. The organization went beyond normal housekeeping. This was the workspace of someone running a covert operation from their own home. Pepper the African gray parrot watched us from his cage in the corner, his head tilted with intelligent curiosity as we invaded his domain. "The burner sim has to be here somewhere," Delphina said, pulling open drawers on the vanity. "Bank credentials too. She'd keep them close but hidden." I checked the closet while Delphina searched the desk. Designer clothes organized by season, shoeboxes stacked with military precision. Nothing out of place, nothing suspicious. Then Delphina made a small sound of discovery. "Dad, I found it." She'd pulled out the bottom drawer of the makeup vanity, the one filled with expensive cosmetics Nola rarely used. Beneath a layer of foundation bottles and eyeshadow palettes sat a small manila envelope unsealed. Inside a burner SIM card, still in its plastic packaging, and a slip of paper with bank account login credentials written in Nola's distinctive handwriting. Account number, routing number, username, password, all of it right there, hidden beneath her makeup 3 feet from where she slept every night. I leaned closer to examine the paper, and Pepper suddenly squawked from his cage. "Hello, Hayes. Hello, Hayes." The voice was mine, not similar to mine, exactly mine. The precise intonation I used when greeting Hayes Barker, our site engineer. The slight upward inflection at the end, the slight upward inflection at the end. The warmth I put into business relationships. "Jesus," I said, stepping back from the cage. "That's my voice. That's exactly how I sound." Hearing my own voice come from that parrot's beak was like watching an echo of my own past turn against me. Delphina stared at the bird, understanding flooding her expression. "She recorded you," she said quietly. "In this room, over and over, training the AI model, and Pepper learned your voice from hearing it played back hundreds of times." The parrot tilted his head again. "Hello, Hayes. Foundation pour at 3. Another phrase I used regularly, another piece of my voice stolen and repurposed. "We need to go," Delphina said, photographing the SIM card and credentials with her phone. "She'll be home any minute." We replaced everything exactly as we'd found it and left the room, closing the door behind us. Nola arrived at 1:15, cheerful and refreshed from her spa day. She kissed my cheek, asked about my morning, mentioned she needed to run errands later. I watched her performance with new eyes, seeing the calculation beneath every gesture. She left again at 2 o'clock for grocery shopping. The moment her car disappeared, Ezra arrived from work, and the 3 of us gathered in my study. Delphina opened the laptop and pulled up the file we'd avoided, until now, Insurance Claim Strategy Final.docx. The document was 15 pages long, detailed, professional, terrifying in its thoroughness. Timeline for implementation. Friday, December 20th, 2025, 9 a.m. Anonymous tip to the Arizona Attorney General's Office. Financial Crimes Division regarding Sterling Ellsworth construction fraud. Friday 2 p.m. estimated Sterling Ellsworth arrested pending investigation. Monday, December 23rd. Nola, Ellsworth files emergency petition for business asset protection as innocent spouse. Tuesday, December 24th. Ellsworth Construction placed under court-ordered receivership, January 2026. Liquidation sale to Desert Star Materials, LLC owner Clyde Sutton at 40% below market value for rapid transaction. A Friday 9 a.m., Delphina said, her voice hollow. She's reporting you in 3 days. I kept reading. The document outlined how Nola would position herself as the betrayed wife, the innocent party protecting company assets from her criminal husband. How the forged evidence would be discovered during the investigation. How Alonzo Trent's connections would expedite the liquidation sale. How I would likely spend the holidays in jail while my company was dismantled and sold for parts. Ezra had been reading over my shoulder, his breathing growing faster. "Wait," he said suddenly. "Clyde Sutton, I know that name." Delphina and I both looked at him. He called me 4 months ago. Ezra continued, his face going pale. August, maybe early September, said he represented a materials supplier interested in the Henderson project. He knew our timeline, our budget constraints. Details only someone inside the company would know. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "Nothing. I said we had existing supplier relationships and wasn't interested." "But Dad," Ezra's voice shook. He knew things, specific things about Henderson Plaza that weren't public information. You think you know what betrayal feels like until you realize your wife built an entire criminal network around destroying you? "This isn't just Mom betraying you," Ezra said. "This is organized, multiple people, a criminal operation." We looked at each other across that desk and understood the truth simultaneously. This wasn't family betrayal. This was organized crime with multiple conspirators: Nola, Alonzo, Trent, Clyde Sutton, God knows who else, all coordinating to dismantle everything I'd built. And we had less than 3 days to stop it. Wednesday morning, I walked into Desmond Caldwell's law office carrying a plastic bag of evidence that could either save my life or prove I'd lost my mind. Desmond Caldwell, 52 years old and sharp as ever, had handled our contracts and wills for 2 decades. His mind had been trained by years prosecuting corporate fraud before entering private practice. If anyone could understand what I was carrying, it was him. His office occupied the 14th floor of a downtown Phoenix building with views of Camelback Mountain. He met me in the conference room at 8 o'clock, sharp coffee already poured. "Desmond, I need you to tell me if I'm crazy or if this is as bad as I think it is," I said, setting the bag on the mahogany table. He gestured for me to continue. I spent the next hour laying it all out. The bottles buried in the backyard, the forged invoices and fake business cards, the USB drive with fabricated emails and deepfake audio, the anniversary pen used to practice my signature, the bank credentials hidden in Nola's vanity, the deleted warning emails, the master strategy document planning my arrest for Friday morning. Desmond made notes on a legal pad, his expression neutral and professional. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me across the table. "It's worse than you think," he said. "But you're not crazy. This is prosecutable fraud, conspiracy, possibly wire fraud if she used electronic communications to facilitate it. You have enough evidence here to pursue both criminal and civil charges." The relief lasted maybe 3 seconds before he continued. "But we're not going to sue her. We're going to trap her." I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "Tell me about the money," Desmond said. "According to this strategy document, she owes someone. How much?" "The fake bank statements show withdrawals totaling around $200,000. I think she's been gambling probably at Alonzo Trent's underground casino. That's the debt she's trying to clear." Desmond nodded, making more notes. "And she expects you to pay it. That's part of her plan, force you into liquidating assets to cover her debts, making you look desperate and guilty when the fraud allegations surface." "Exactly. So here's what we do." Desmond pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and started sketching a timeline. "You're going to give her the money, $200,000. I stared at him. "You're going to give her the money." "No, you're going to put it in escrow under my control, a special account that requires dual authorization for any transfer. When Nola tells Alonzo the money is available, and when he attempts to accept the transfer, federal financial monitoring systems will flag it." "Why?" Desmond smiled, the expression of a former prosecutor who just found his definitive proof. "Because Alonzo Trent is already under federal investigation. The FBI has been watching his casino operation for over a year. Any large financial transaction involving him gets automatically reported to FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. When he tries to accept $200,000 from you, it triggers alerts. The FBI gets notification, and suddenly they have evidence of ongoing criminal enterprise." Desmond was building a legal mousetrap, and my wife was about to walk right into it, baited with her own greed. So the money I'm supposedly paying her debt with becomes the evidence that destroys them both. I said, understanding crystallizing. Precisely. You never lose control of the funds. They sit in escrow monitored by federal systems, and the moment Alonzo reaches for them, the trap springs. Nola thinks she's clearing her debt. She's actually triggering her own downfall. I sat back in the leather chair, processing the elegant brutality of it. How soon can you set this up? I asked. This afternoon. I'll have the escrow account active by 5 o'clock. My phone buzzed. A text from Delphina at Hampton Investigations. You need to hear this. I'd sent Delphina to meet with Virgil Hampton, a private investigator I'd used once before for a contractor dispute. If Alonzo was under federal investigation, Virgil would know he had contacts throughout Phoenix law enforcement. I need to make a call, I told Desmond. Delphina answered on the first ring. Dad put me on speaker. Desmond needs to hear this too. I switched to speaker mode. Go ahead. I'm with Virgil Hampton at his office in Tempe. Delphina's voice came through clear and urgent. Virgil, tell my father what you just told me. A gravelly voice joined the call. Virgil Hampton, a 56-year-old private investigator with a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. Mr. Ellsworth, I've been photographing Alonzo Trent for 3 months on behalf of another client investigating casino fraud, Virgil said. Your wife appears in about 40% of my surveillance photos. Hotels, restaurants, the underground casino, location on East McDowell, meetings at what appears to be a shell company office registered to Desert Star Materials. Yet the FBI knows about him, Delphina asked, though I could tell from her tone she'd already gotten the answer. They've been watching him for over a year, Virgil confirmed. Your mother picked the worst possible partner for this scheme. Alonzo Trent is a known federal target. His operation is compromised. It's just a matter of timing before they move in. The FBI, federal investigation, casino fraud. Nola had bet everything on a man who was already losing. Desmond leaned toward the speaker. Virgil, this is Desmond Caldwell Sterling's attorney. How confident are you that the feds are close to moving? Very, Virgil said. My law enforcement contacts say warrants are being prepared. Could be days, could be weeks, but it's coming. Then we need to move faster, Desmond said. Sterling the escrow trap is our best play. We trigger it tomorrow, force Alonzo's hand before the FBI schedule. Delphina spoke again, her voice tight. Virgil just showed me photos from last week. Mom meeting Alonzo at a hotel in Scottsdale. They weren't being careful. They thought they were safe. Virgil's voice came back on. Your mother owes money to a man the feds have been watching for months. This story ends soon one way or another. The only question is who gets dragged down with him when it does. Delphina called me immediately after the call ended. We had 2 days to make sure the answer wasn't us. But first, we needed one more piece of the puzzle. The missing piece was something we already had. We just needed to document it properly. Wednesday morning, Ezra walked into Ellsworth Construction like any other day, knowing every word he spoke could either save or destroy his father. He sat at his project management desk, pulled up the Henderson Plaza schedules, and forced himself to focus on normal work. Around 10 o'clock, his phone buzzed, a text from Nola. Does your dad seem different to you? He's been quiet lately. Ezra's heart hammered against his ribs. He stared at the screen, aware that every word of his response would be analyzed. He typed carefully. Dad's fine, just tired. Big project stress. Nothing unusual, Mom. He watched the 3 dots appear. Nola was typing. The dots disappeared. Appeared again. Disappeared. Finally, okay, just checking on him. Ezra exhaled slowly and set the phone face down on his desk. His hands were shaking. At 12:30, Saskia Kent appeared at Ezra's desk. Ezra, can we talk privately? She asked, her voice quiet. Small conference room. Saskia Kent, our 42-year-old executive secretary, had worked the front desk for 8 years and noticed everything, including patterns nobody else saw. She was efficient professional and usually kept to herself. Ezra followed her to the small conference room at the end of the hall. She closed the door and turned to face him, her expression troubled. I need to tell you something about your mother, Saskia said. I should have said something earlier, but I didn't want to overstep. It seemed like family business. What is it? Ezra asked. She's been in your father's office, Saskia said. At least 6 times over the past 3 months, maybe more. Always when Sterling was at construction sites. Always carrying that big handbag. She uses the brown leather one, much larger than her usual purse. Ezra's pulse quickened. When was the last time? 2 weeks ago. Wednesday afternoon. Sterling was at the Tempe site all day. Saskia's voice dropped lower. I saw her leave with a stack of what looked like blank invoice forms, the ones with the company letterhead and logo. She had them tucked into her handbag. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because she's your mother. She's Sterling's wife. I assumed she had permission to be in there, that maybe she was helping with paperwork or organizing files. Saskia looked genuinely distressed. But the way she moved quickly like she didn't want to be seen, it bothered me. I documented the dates in my calendar just in case. Ezra pulled out his phone. Saskia, would you be willing to put that in writing, an official statement? She nodded. If it helps Sterling, yes, absolutely. Ezra texted me immediately. Saskia Kent witnessed Mom taking blank invoices 2 weeks ago. 6 office visits total. She'll document everything. The final piece of independent corroboration. A witness who had no reason to lie, no stake in family drama, just professional observation of suspicious behavior. That afternoon at 3 o'clock, Delphina, Ezra, and I gathered in my home study for a video call with Desmond Caldwell. The attorney's face appeared on the laptop screen, his office background sharp and professional. We have everything we need. Desmond began without preamble. Sterling, the escrow account is active. I need you to authorize the transfer this afternoon, $200,000 from your personal savings into the escrow account I control. And then what? I asked. Then you tell Nola the money is available to clear her debt. You don't accuse her of anything. You don't confront her. You simply say, you've set aside funds to handle some financial obligations, and you've placed them in escrow for security purposes. She'll know what that means, Delphina said. Exactly, Desmond confirmed. She'll interpret it as you paying her gambling debt to Alonzo without directly acknowledging what you know. She'll contact Alonzo. Alonzo will attempt to authorize the transfer from escrow to his accounts. And that's when the FBI gets involved, I said. And that's when the federal financial monitoring systems flag the transaction. Alonzo Trent is already on multiple watch lists. Any large transfer involving him generates automatic reports to FinCEN and the FBI. They'll have evidence of ongoing criminal enterprise. Your money becomes the core evidence they've been waiting for. Before I reveal the complete strategy that turned this nightmare around, are you still with me? Comment A if you think this trap will work, or B if you think something will go wrong, and tell me why in one sentence. The money we're using to trap her, is it safe? I asked. Can she actually access it? Not a cent, Desmond said firmly. It stays in escrow until law enforcement freezes it as evidence. She gets nothing. You lose nothing except the temporary placement of funds that will be returned to you once the case concludes. Meanwhile, Desmond continued, Virgil Hampton's surveillance photographs provide grounds for immediate divorce filing. We'll submit those Friday afternoon citing adultery and fraud. The divorce petition will include asset protection orders preventing Nola from liquidating or transferring any community property. The Friday morning when Nola thinks she's destroying you, she'll actually be walking into federal custody, Desmond said. The Arizona Economic Crimes Department will receive her anonymous tip about construction fraud at 9 a.m., exactly as her plan outlined. But by then the FBI will have already flagged her and Alonzo's financial activities. When local authorities start investigating, they'll discover federal agents are already involved. Nola's fraud report becomes evidence of her own conspiracy. We weren't building a defense anymore. We were building a legal trap, and Nola would ensnare herself with the web she'd spent 8 months weaving. What about Clyde Sutton? Ezra asked, the shell company owner. Virgil confirmed Sutton is also under investigation, Desmond said. When Alonzo falls, Sutton falls with him. The whole network collapses. Delphina leaned back in her chair, processing the scope of it. So, we don't confront her. We don't warn her. We just let her execute her own plan while we've already dismantled it from underneath. Precisely, Desmond said. She thinks she's in control. She has no idea the trap is already sprung. The call ended at 4:15. The three of us sat in the study in silence for a long moment. Delphina looked at me across the desk, and for the first time in 3 days, I saw something other than fear in her eyes. I saw certainty. They won't know the trap has sprung until it's too late, she said. That night, for the first time since I'd watched Nola bury that first bottle, I actually slept. But Thursday brought one final piece of evidence I hadn't anticipated. Thursday morning, I woke up rested for the first time in a week and realized the worst part I had, to pretend everything was normal for one more day. At 9 o'clock, I met Saskia Kent in the small conference room at Ellsworth Construction. She'd brought her desk calendar, the one she'd kept for 8 years, documenting every detail of office operations with meticulous precision. I documented every date she came in, Saskia said, opening the calendar to November. I thought it was strange, but didn't want to overstep. She's your wife, and I assumed you knew. She walked me through the timeline. November 3rd, a Tuesday when I'd been at the Henderson site all day. November 17th, another Tuesday, Tempe commercial inspection. November 29th, December 5th, December 12th. All weekdays. All during hours when I was guaranteed to be off-site. She always carried that oversized designer handbag, Saskia continued. The brown leather one much bigger than her usual purse. It seemed out of place for a casual visit. December 12th. I said, reading the entry, "What did you see that day?" Saskia's expression tightened with remembered discomfort. She left with blank invoice forms, a whole stack. I almost said something, but she's your wife. I thought maybe you'd asked her to grab them for some reason, organizing files at home, I don't know. How many forms? Maybe 25 sheets. The official Ellsworth Construction supplier order, forms with the logo and signature line. The same forms we'd found in the first buried bottle, forged with my signature, using the anniversary pen. Yes, Saskia, why midweek? I asked. Why always Tuesday or Wednesdays? She flipped through her calendar, cross-referencing dates. Those are your standing site inspection days. Tuesday for Henderson, Wednesday for rotating projects. You block them in the shared calendar months in advance. Systematic, calculated, not opportunistic theft, but deliberate planning based on my published schedule. I need you to write this down, I said. Every date, every observation, exactly as you told me. For legal purposes, yes. Saskia nodded and pulled out a clean sheet of paper. Her testimony would be the independent corroboration that transformed our family's word against Nola's into documented pattern evidence witnessed by an unbiased third party. I left the office at 4:30 and drove home, knowing I had one more performance to deliver. Thursday evening at 7 o'clock, I sat across from Nola at our dining table. Roasted chicken vegetables, a bottle of wine she'd opened to breathe. The table was set with our good plates, cloth napkins, candles. "How's the Henderson project coming?" Nola asked, cutting into her chicken with precise, delicate movements. "You've seemed stressed about it lately." "It's fine," I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. "Just the usual complications." "Well, you work too hard, always have." She smiled, that familiar warm expression I'd seen across this table for 35 years. "Next week, let's go to our old spot downtown, the Italian place where we celebrated our 10th anniversary. Remember? The night you gave me the beautiful pen, the pen she'd used to forge my signature on fraudulent invoices. Like old times?" She continued, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "How do you sit across from someone you've loved for 35 years and see a complete stranger wearing her face?" "Yeah, we'll see," I said. She talked about a recipe she'd seen online, reminded me about a movie she wanted to watch on Saturday, mentioned that Delphina seemed tired lately, and maybe we should invite her over for Sunday dinner. Normal conversation, comfortable domestic planning, the performance of a marriage that had ended months or years ago, though I'd only just learned it. I watched her perform this role, the interested wife, the caring mother, the partner making plans for next week, and wondered when it started. When did the authentic Nola end and this calculated version begin? 2 years ago, when she claimed the separate bedroom. 5 years ago, when she started asking about my schedule with unusual precision. 10 years ago, before I'd even noticed something was wrong. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing I couldn't pinpoint when she'd stopped being real. "You're quiet tonight," Nola said, refilling her wine glass. "Just thinking about work." "Always thinking about work," she laughed, light and affectionate. "That's my Sterling." Her Sterling. As if she had any claim to know who I was, as if we were still connected by something other than legal documents and shared property. After dinner, Nola cleared the dishes while I helped dry the plates, a domestic ritual we'd performed thousands of times. She hummed softly as she washed, and I recognized the melody, a song from our wedding reception, one we'd danced to while our parents watched and our friends clapped. She hummed our wedding song while washing dishes, and I felt nothing but cold calculation, wondering if she'd practiced that touch too. "I'm exhausted," Nola said, drying her hands on the dish towel. "Going to turn in early. Big day tomorrow, spa appointment and errands." No mention of the 9 a.m. anonymous tip she planned to file. No hint of the fraud report that would supposedly destroy me. Just spa appointments and errands, the mundane cover story for my planned destruction. "Sleep well," I said. "Love you." The words came automatically, 35 years of habit, speaking without thought. She kissed my cheek quick, casual the gesture of long familiarity, and headed toward her bedroom. I stood at the kitchen sink, dish towel in hand, watching her bedroom door close. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, she would sit at her computer and send those files to the Arizona Economic Crimes Department. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, she thought she'd destroy me, report me for fraud, trigger my arrest, position herself as the innocent spouse protecting company assets. She had no idea that Desmond had already set the trap, that the FBI was already watching Alonzo, that Virgil had months of surveillance photographs, that Saskia had documented her office infiltrations, that every move she'd planned had been anticipated and countered. I almost pitied her. She'd spent 8 months building this conspiracy, recruiting accomplices, forging documents, creating deepfake audio, planting evidence in the backyard. 8 months of meticulous planning, all of it about to collapse in a single morning because she'd allied herself with a man already marked for federal prosecution. After Nola went to bed Thursday night, Delfina and I stayed up running one final check through the system logs and found the piece of evidence that changed everything. 11 o'clock. The house was quiet except for the hum of multiple monitors in my study displaying cascading lines of data. Delfina had been running comprehensive email system logs for the past hour, going back a full year, instead of just the 8 months we'd initially examined. "Dad, look at this," she said, her voice tight. "When did Mom meet Alonzo?" Delfina asked, though she already knew the answer. "June," I said. "She met him in June at some business networking event. Or so she said. That's when your surveillance first placed them together." Delfina scrolled through the account's sent mail history. The anonymous email had contacted 2 addresses repeatedly since its creation in April, one registered to Desert Star Materials, LLC, another to a business consultant named Clyde Sutton. The first email, dated April 16, 2025, had the subject line "Proposal for Partnership Opportunity. Construction sector. She didn't meet him and fall into this," Delfina said, her voice hollow. "She built this, then found him. She's not the accomplice. She's the architect." I stared at the screen, watching the timeline reconstruct itself in my mind. April, Nola creates anonymous account, begins recruiting. May, more emails to Sutton and Desert Star, refining the plan. June 1st, documented meeting with Alonzo Trent, not a chance encounter at a networking event, but a planned rendezvous with a recruited conspirator. July, Hayes Barker's warning email, intercepted and deleted. August 1st, fraudulent invoices appear in the system. Every piece of this conspiracy had been Nola's design from the beginning. "I kept thinking she was weak," I said quietly. "That Alonzo seduced her, manipulated her into betraying me. That she was a victim who became an accomplice." "She was never the victim," Delfina said. "She was the predator. You ever realize the person you've been protecting was the one you needed protection from all along?" Delfina left around midnight, exhausted and needing to process what we'd found. I walked her to her car, hugged her goodnight, watched her taillights disappear down the street. Then I went to the backyard. The December night air was cool, dry, desert silence surrounding me. Garden lights illuminated the flagstone patio, and the areas beyond, the Palo Verde tree, the oleander bushes, and there, exactly where we'd found them, the 2 rose pots. I stood looking at them for a long time. 2 decorative planters holding hybrid tea roses Nola had claimed to love. Beneath them, 6 inches of Arizona dirt, and beneath that, the waterproof bottles containing evidence she'd buried, thinking it would destroy me. Evidence I'd already excavated, analyzed, and turned into her own downfall. Tomorrow, Friday, it all ends tomorrow. Not the way she planned it, not with my arrest at 2 p.m. following her 9 a.m. anonymous tip. Not with her positioning herself as the innocent spouse. Not with Ellsworth Construction liquidated to Desert Star Materials for 40 cents on the dollar. My way. With federal agents arresting Alonzo Trent for financial crimes. With Nola's conspiracy exposed through her own buried evidence. With Desmond's trap springing the moment she thought she'd won. I looked up at the house. Nola's bedroom window, dark curtains closed. The woman inside sleeping peacefully, confident in her Friday morning plan. She'd set her alarm for 8 a.m. early enough to file the anonymous report before her supposed spa appointment at 9:30. Delphina's childhood room window dark and empty since she'd moved out 6 years ago. Ezra's old room, same empty since he'd gotten his own place 4 years back. This house had held 35 years of family life. Birthday parties in this backyard, holiday dinners at that dining table, arguments and reconciliations, and the ordinary texture of marriage. Tomorrow it becomes evidence in a federal case. Tomorrow Nola leaves in handcuffs and never returns. I thought about the evidence we'd found, the forged invoices and fake business cards, the deep-fake audio files with Pepper the Parrot's cry, proving she'd made them in her bedroom, the anniversary pen I'd given her with love, repurposed as a forgery tool, the deleted emails, the offshore account credentials, the master strategy document planning my destruction. 8 months of meticulous planning, all of it about to collapse because she'd allied herself with a man already marked for federal prosecution, because she'd left a digital trail, because she'd underestimated the possibility that I might fight back. I stood there looking at those rose pots, and I didn't feel rage or heartbreak anymore, just a cold determination to make sure she never hurt another person I loved. Tomorrow isn't about revenge. It's about protection. Protecting Ellsworth Construction, the company I built from nothing over 35 years. Protecting Delphina and Ezra, who'd been manipulated by their own mother. Protecting myself from a predator who'd shared my bed, raised my children, and simultaneously planned my destruction. I built this, I said aloud to the empty backyard. I'll protect it. That's what fathers do. The rose pots sat there silent testimony to Nola's deception. She'd planted them with such care, such precision, measuring depths and checking placements 3 times. Professional execution of a criminal plan. But she'd made one fatal mistake. She'd buried the evidence on my property. In my backyard, 6 inches beneath plants she'd tended in full view, thinking I'd never look, never suspect, never dig. 35 years in this house, I said quietly. 35 years with her. How much of it was real? The early years certainly, young love, building the business together, welcoming Delphina and then Ezra. But when did it curdle? When did she start seeing me, not as a partner, but as a target? 2 years ago, 5:10. Does it even matter anymore? Tomorrow the truth wins, I said. That's all that matters. I looked at those rose pots one last time under the garden lights, the evidence Nola had buried, thinking it would destroy me, not knowing I'd already dug it up and turned it into her own noose. Tomorrow, it all ends. Not Nola's way, walking free with my company and my money. My way with her in handcuffs and my family safe. I walked back inside at nearly 2 a.m. and climbed the stairs to my bedroom. Tomorrow, Friday, would arrive in less than 6 hours. Friday morning came faster than I expected. Friday morning, 7 o'clock, the 3 of us sat at the kitchen table eating breakfast in silence, each of us knowing that in 2 hours our family would never be the same. I'd slept maybe 3 hours after my backyard vigil, waking at 6 to find Delphina and Ezra already in the kitchen, coffee brewing, the kind of breakfast you eat when you need fuel but can't taste anything. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. Nobody spoke beyond necessary words. "It's coffee," Delphina asked. "Please." "More eggs," Ezra offered. "I'm good." We ate in absolute concentration and heavy silence, checking watches, phones on the table, face up, waiting for the scheduled hour to arrive. At 7:30, sharp Ezra stood. He walked around the table to where I sat, leaned down and kissed my forehead, something he hadn't done since he was maybe 8 years old, before boys learn they're supposed to stop showing affection that way. "I love you, Dad," he said, "no matter what happens today." My throat tightened. "I love you too." "I'll be at the office. Phone on." He picked up his keys, waiting for the signal. Delphina stood as well, carrying her laptop toward my study. "We're ready. Everything's in place." Then let's see this through," I said. Ezra left through the front door. Delphina disappeared into the study, closing the door halfway. I poured another cup of coffee, opened the newspaper I'd already read online, and waited for Nola to wake. The house settled into morning quiet. I could hear Delphina typing in the study, the low hum of traffic outside, the tick of the wall clock, marking each minute until 8 o'clock. At exactly 8, Nola's bedroom door opened. She emerged in a silk robe, hair perfect, despite supposedly just waking, makeup already applied. She smiled when she saw me at the table. "Good morning," she said, pouring coffee into her favorite mug. "You're up early?" "Couldn't sleep. Work stress." "You work too much." She sat across from me, that familiar domestic arrangement we'd occupied thousands of times. "You know what, I'm thinking of staying home all day instead of my usual Friday errands." We could have lunch together. Wouldn't that be lovely? I looked up from the newspaper, meeting her eyes. The performance was flawless, genuine warmth, spontaneous suggestion, the loving wife wanting to spend quality time with her husband. Now that sounds perfect, I said, forcing warmth into my voice. I'd like that. Good. She reached across the table to touch my hand, her fingers warm against mine. Just need to handle a few emails first in my workspace, maybe an hour or so. Then the day is ours. Take your time. She stood, coffee mug in hand, and walked toward the hallway that led to her private workspace, the small room she'd claimed 2 years ago for her meditation and personal correspondence. I returned to the newspaper, though I wasn't reading a single word. The clock read 8:15, 45 minutes until her planned strike. I watched my wife of 35 years pour coffee and smile at me, and felt nothing but the cold certainty that this performance would end within the hour. At 8:30, I set down the newspaper and moved quietly through the house. Delfina sat in the study dual monitors, displaying financial systems and email logs, everything ready for immediate documentation. She glanced up as I passed, gave a single nod. I continued down the hallway. Nola's workspace door was closed but not latched. Through the narrow crack, I could see her seated at her desk, a laptop I didn't recognize, sleeker than our home computer, unfamiliar, clearly kept somewhere I'd never thought to look. I positioned myself against the wall where I could watch without being seen. 8:35. She opened a desk drawer, extracted a small USB drive, inserted it into the laptop, clicked through folders. 8:40. She opened her email client, not her usual account, but the anonymous one Delfina had found in the logs. procure.solutions.az@gmail.com. She began composing a new message. I watched her type the recipient address fraud, .investigations@azeconomics.acurity.gov. Subject line, urgent report, construction fraud, Henderson Plaza, project Phoenix, Arizona. 8:43. She attached files from the USB drive. I couldn't see the file names, but I knew what they were. The forged invoices, the fake bank statements, the fabricated audio files, all the manufactured evidence she'd spent 8 months creating. She typed rapidly in the message body. I caught fragments through the crack. Systematic fraud, substandard materials, false invoicing, Sterling Ellsworth owner, evidence attached. 8:45. Her hand moved to the mouse. The cursor hovered over the send button at the bottom of the screen. She paused, reread the email, adjusted a sentence, checked the attachments again. This has to look perfect, she muttered to herself. One last check. My phone vibrated silently in my pocket. I pulled it out carefully, glanced at the screen. Ezra, Dad, you ready? I switched to the group text thread. Delfina had already responded. Everything documented, waiting for your signal. Through the crack, I watched Nola's cursor move back to the send button. Her finger, the mouse, the send button. 2 clicks away from her own destruction. She took a breath, straightened her shoulders, moved the cursor to send. I typed a single word to Ezra and Delfina now. Nola's finger hovered over the send button, her eyes scanning the accusation email one final time before she'd transmit it to the Arizona Attorney General's Office Financial Crimes Division. My phone buzzed silently in my pocket. Ezra's confirmation that he'd received my signal, that everything was coordinated. I pushed the door open and walked into Nola's workspace, gripping the TV remote tightly, and watched 35 years of lies crumble in real time. Nola's head snapped up from her laptop finger, still hovering over the mouse. The fraud report email sat on screen, ready to send, my name prominently featured in the subject line. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice tight. "Sterling, I'm in the middle of something." I pressed a button on the remote. The large television screen in the living room, visible through her workspace doorway, flickered to life, mirrored from Delfina's laptop in the study. Surveillance footage filled the screen. Nola and Alonzo Trent entering a Phoenix hotel on a Tuesday afternoon in October, timestamp visible in the corner. Both of them walking close, his hand on the small of her back. Virgil Hampton's watermark at the bottom of the frame. The video cut to a second clip. The same 2 people at an upscale restaurant leaning across a table in intimate conversation. September. Third clip. Nola entering the Desert Star Materials LLC office building in Tempe, meeting Alonzo inside the lobby. August. Nola's face drained of color as she watched herself on the screen. What are you doing?" Her voice shook now. Turn that off. No, I said calmly. I think you should see this. We all should. That's not what it looks like. I can explain. Then explain. I gestured to the screen where a fourth clip showed her leaving the same building 2 hours later, carrying a large envelope. Start with August 19th. What were you doing at Desert Star Materials as Ibarsi? She stood pushing back from her desk. Sterling, please. This is a misunderstanding. Open your email, Nola, the one you were just preparing to send. Her eyes flickered to the laptop screen, then back to me. I don't know what you're talking about. I walked to her desk and placed the first piece of evidence on the surface in front of her, the jeweled blue ballpoint pen from our 10th anniversary, sterling silver, sapphire cap. The pen she'd used to practice forging my signature. Recognize this, I asked. She stared at it, saying nothing. I placed the second item, the burner SIM card from her makeup vanity still in its plastic packaging, with the slip of paper showing bank account login credentials. How about this? Third item, Saskia Kent's written statement, 3 pages, documenting 6 office visits with specific dates and times. Fourth, Merritt Wolf's audio forensics report, highlighting the African gray parrot vocalization in the deepfake recordings. Fifth, a printout of the anonymous email account creationprocure.solutions.az@gmail.com, dated April 14th, 2025. 2 months before, she'd supposedly met Alonzo Trent at that networking event. Each piece of evidence I placed on her desk was another layer of truth completely uncovering the scheme she'd built. Sterling, please, Nola said, her voice breaking. You don't understand. I was protecting us, protecting this family. From what? I asked. From the money you stole. From the company you tried to frame me for destroying, protecting us. How exactly? You don't know what it's like, she said, tears forming. You're never home. Always at the office, always at construction sites. I was alone for years. So you committed fraud, forgery, conspiracy. I made mistakes. You made choices. I picked up the pen. This pen I gave you with 3 months' savings. You used it to forge my signature on invoices for a company that doesn't exist. The door behind me opened. Delphina and Ezra entered, positioning themselves on either side of me. A united front. Nola looked at her children, and something shifted in her expression from defensive to pleading. Delphina, Ezra, please understand. I was lonely. Your father was never home. I made mistakes, but I love this family. I was trying to protect you from dangerous people who were threatening us. What dangerous people? Delphina asked, her voice cold and measured. Alonzo, he forced me into this. He threatened to hurt you if I didn't help him. Then why did you create the anonymous email account 2 months before you met him? Delphina asked. Nola's mouth opened, closed, no answer. Ezra stepped forward and placed a manila folder on the desk among the other evidence. Hayes Barker's dossier on Clyde Sutton. I watched Nola's eyes land on the name printed on the folder tab. Clyde Sutton, Ezra said. Nevada contractor license revoked 7 years ago for materials fraud. Connected to Alonzo Trent's underground casino network. Multiple aliases, known for construction industry schemes. He opened the folder, revealing documentation. Criminal background check, Nevada State Contractors Board, disciplinary action. Photographs of Sutton with Alonzo at various locations. He called me 4 months ago, Ezra continued. Offered cheap materials for Henderson Plaza, new details only someone with inside access would know. Delphina leaned forward slightly, her voice quiet but devastating. Oh, Mom, do you know who Clyde Sutton is? When Nola looked at our children and tried to claim she'd done this for love, I saw Delphina's face harden into something I'd never seen before, pity mixed with disgust. Nola stared at the dossier. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. 20. She looked from the folder to Ezra, to Delphina, to me. Her hands trembled against the desk. She started, then stopped. The surveillance footage continued playing on the living room screen behind us. More clips, more timestamps, more evidence. Do you know who Clyde Sutton is? Delphina repeated. Nola's face crumpled. Not in grief or remorse in the realization that she'd been caught, that every lie she'd constructed had been dismantled, that her children were looking at her with the same cold assessment I'd used when examining the buried evidence. She said nothing. That silence was the answer. She knew exactly who Clyde Sutton was. She knew he wasn't some random criminal who threatened her family. She knew he was part of the network she'd recruited to help destroy me. The fraud email sat open on her laptop screen, unsent cursor still blinking in the message body. And she was about to find out what we'd done with that knowledge. Nola's silence lasted another 10 seconds. Then she laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a bitter, hollow sound that didn't match anything I'd heard from her in 35 years. "You want the truth?" she said, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Fine, here's the truth. It was never about love. Not with Alonzo, not with any of this." "Then what was it about?" I asked. She gestured at the evidence spread across her desk. The pen, the SIM card, the surveillance footage still playing on the living room screen. Money, gambling, the one thing I was good at that you never knew about. Her voice cracked. $300,000 over 3 years sterling. That's what I took from you, from us. From the joint accounts, the business expense reports, every place I could skim without you noticing. Delphina's sharp intake of breath behind me was the only sound in the room. 300,000. Nola continued, the words spilling out now, like a dam had broken. Started small in 2022, a few thousand here and there. Offshore casino sites, high-stakes poker. I was good at it, good enough to win sometimes. But the losses, they kept mounting. And Alonzo, Ezra asked, his voice tight. "He wasn't my lover," Nola said with another bitter laugh. "He was my dealer, his casino, his connections, his network. Every romantic dinner you saw in that surveillance footage, debt negotiations. Every hotel meeting, money drops. I owed him everything, and he owned me." I watched her hands shake as she spoke, the same hands that had held mine on our wedding day, that had cradled our newborn children, that had signed my name on withdrawal slips while I slept upstairs. 33 years of touch, and I'd never felt the theft beneath it. "You never noticed," Nola said, looking directly at me. "Because you never looked. You were always at the office, always at construction sites, always building your empire. I could have stolen $1 million and you wouldn't have known. So you framed me," I said. "Forged invoices, fake audio, buried evidence in the backyard, all of it to what? To walk away clean." "To save myself," she snapped. "Alonzo wanted his money, all of it. And when I couldn't pay, he suggested an alternative arrangement. Help him take down Ellsworth Construction, liquidate it through Clyde Sutton's shell company, and my debt disappears." "You were going to send me to prison," Delphina said, her voice shaking with contained fury. "You were going to destroy Dad's reputation, his company, everything he built, to survive," Nola shouted. "You don't understand what it's like to owe that kind of money to people like that. They don't just take your assets, they take everything." The doorbell rang. Desmond Caldwell stood on the front porch with 2 federal agents in dark suits. I'd texted him 15 minutes earlier, the signal we'd arranged. I led them into the living room, where Nola could see them through the workspace doorway. Her face went white. "Nola Ellsworth," the lead agent said, stepping into her workspace and displaying his federal badge. "I'm Special Agent Vance with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We have a federal warrant for your arrest, signed by a United States magistrate judge for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit fraud." The second agent moved behind her, pulling handcuffs from his belt. Nola looked at me, then at Desmond, then at our children. "Sterling, please," she whispered. "We can work this out. I'll pay it back. You have the right to remain silent," Agent Morrison continued. The handcuffs clicked into place. Desmond stepped forward, his expression professional and cold. "Mrs. Ellsworth, you should also know that Alonzo Trent has been in federal custody since Wednesday. He provided evidence of your financial crimes in exchange for reduced sentencing on his own money laundering charges." Nola's head snapped up. "What?" "Mr. Trent cut a deal with the FBI," Desmond said. "The moment federal investigators approached him about his casino operation, he gave them everything. Bank records, communication logs, your payment history. He's been cooperating for 3 weeks. The color drained from Nola's face completely. She looked like she might collapse. He betrayed me." "There was never anything to betray," Desmond said. "It was always a transaction, and when the price was right, he sold you out." Desmond had warned me this would feel hollow. Victory without triumph, justice without joy. He was right. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt old. Old and tired and strangely lighter, like I'd been carrying her secrets alongside my own for years. The agents led Nola toward the front door. She looked back once at Delphina and Ezra, her face crumpling. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry." Neither of them responded. I followed the procession to the front door. The morning sun streamed through bright and clear, despite everything that had just happened. A federal vehicle sat in our driveway where Nola's car usually parked. They put her in the back seat, careful with her head, as she ducked inside. The door closed with a solid thunk. Agent Morrison handed me a business card. "We'll need formal statements from you and your children. Mr. Caldwell has the details." "Thank you," I said. The vehicle pulled away, carrying my wife of 35 years toward federal processing arraignment and whatever came after, carrying her away from this house, this family, this life she'd tried to destroy. I stood watching the investigation vehicle drive away. Ezra stepped up beside me on the right, his hand finding my shoulder. Delfina moved to my left, her fingers intertwining with mine. 3 of us, standing firm. The house behind us, our home for 33 years, felt different now. Emptier, yes, but cleaner somehow. The weight of her deception had lifted, leaving only the truth and the 3 people who'd fought to protect it. "Dad," Delfina said quietly. I squeezed her hand. "I'm okay. Are you—" I looked at my children, both of them standing with me on this threshold between the past and whatever came next. "I will be," I said. Ezra's grip tightened on my shoulder. Delfina leaned her head against my arm. We didn't speak after that. We didn't need to. We'd survived the worst together, and we were still standing. This is our home. The divorce papers were already printed when I walked into Desmond's office 3 hours later. After the federal vehicle took Nola away, Delfina and Ezra had insisted on coming with me to Desmond's downtown office. Neither of them wanted to be alone, and neither did I. We sat together in Desmond's conference room. At 1 o'clock Friday afternoon, the city of Phoenix spread out beyond the 14th floor windows. Desmond placed a manila folder on the mahogany table in front of me. Inside, the dissolution of a 35-year marriage reduced to legal language and signature lines. "I drafted these 2 weeks ago," Desmond said. "The moment you brought me the USB evidence, I knew this was coming." I stared at the top page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My name, Nola's name, irreconcilable differences, fraud. The Arizona Superior Court seal at the top. Arizona law permits full asset protection when spousal fraud is proven. Desmond continued. Nola gets 0 equity in Ellsworth Construction, 0 claim to the house, 0 access to joint accounts. Everything's protected. She won't contest, I said. Federal custody eliminates her negotiating power. Desmond confirmed. She'll sign whatever we put in front of her, likely as part of a plea agreement. I picked up the pen, my own pen this time, not the forged anniversary gift, and held it over the signature line. 35 years, I said, gone in one signature. Delfina reached across the table and touched my hand. "You're protecting what you built, Dad." "That's not cruelty," Desmond added. "That's survival." I signed. The pen scratched across paper, my authentic signature, authorizing the end of my marriage. Strange how similar it looked to all those forgeries Nola had practiced with the anniversary pen. "There's more," Desmond said, pulling out a second folder. "The FBI froze all of Alonzo Trent's accounts this morning. Desert Star Casino, Desert Star Materials LLC, every shell company connected to his operation. Clyde Sutton was arrested 2 hours ago on fraud and conspiracy charges." "How long will Nola be in custody?" Ezra asked. "Arraignment Monday morning, bail hearing to follow. Given the amount of money involved and the organized nature of the conspiracy, I doubt she'll make bail." Desmond leaned back in his chair. "Wire fraud carries up to 20 years federal time. With cooperation and plea deals, she's looking at 5 to 7 minimum." We left Desmond's office at 3:30. Delfina drove us home in silence, the city passing by in afternoon sunlight that felt too bright for the day we'd had. At 4:30, the 3 of us stood in the backyard around the fire pit, a circle of stone and metal we'd installed 5 years ago for family gatherings that now felt like they'd happened in a different lifetime. Ezra carried a cardboard box filled with duplicate evidence files. Not the originals, those had been turned over to federal authorities, but the copies we'd made for our own documentation. Forged invoices, printed emails, screenshots of fake bank statements. "We don't need these anymore," I said, loading them into the fire pit. Delfina added the printed surveillance photos, careful not to look at her mother's face in the images. Ezra contributed the duplicate audio files burned onto CDs, the discs catching sunlight before they went into the pile. I struck a match. The paper caught quickly, flames spreading through the evidence with hungry efficiency. Smoke rose in a gray column, drifting toward the rose garden, where Nola's hybrid teas still bloomed in their decorative pots. The heat from the fire pit was intense. As the smoke passed over the roses, I watched the petals begin to wilt. The red blooms, so carefully tended, started curling at the edges. Brown spots appeared. Petals loosened and fell. "These roses were always Mom's," Ezra said quietly. "Never really yours." "Just let them die," I said. "We'll plant something honest." We stood there watching evidence burn and roses wither for nearly an hour. Nobody spoke except to occasionally add more paper to the flames. The pile of forgeries and conspiracies reduced to ash, just like the relationship they'd been designed to destroy. The roses curled black at the edges, petals falling, like everything beautiful I thought I'd built with her. By 6 o'clock, the fire had burned down to embers. The rose garden looked decimated, heat-shocked plants with blackened petals scattered across the flagstone patio, like confetti at a funeral. Delphina stood beside me, watching the last flames flicker and die. "Do you regret it, Dad?" she asked. I thought about the question. Regret what exactly? The marriage. The 35 years exposing Nola's crimes, fighting back instead of letting her destroy me. I looked at the burned evidence, at the dying roses, at the 2 children who'd stood beside me through the worst week of my life. "No," I said, "I don't regret it. Not even—" Delphina trailed off, gesturing at the house, the garden, the visible remnants of our family life. "I don't regret finding the truth," I clarified. "I regret the 3 decades I spent defending a fiction. I regret not seeing it sooner, but discovering what she was doing, stopping her protecting you and Ezra and the company." I shook my head. No regret there. A rose petal detached from the nearest plant and drifted to the ground. Then another. The heat damage was terminal. These plants wouldn't recover. "What will you plant instead?" Ezra asked. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Something that doesn't need as much attention. Something that can grow without me having to tend it constantly." "Something honest," Delphina said, echoing my earlier words. "Yeah, something honest." We stood there as the December sun dropped toward the horizon, 3 people in a backyard that would never be the same, watching rose petals fall like ash, and knowing that tomorrow we'd start the work of rebuilding. Time to plant something else. We sat in Dr. Prescott's waiting room, like strangers at a funeral, none of us sure whose grief we were mourning. A week had passed since Nola's arrest. 7 days of phone calls with attorneys' statements to federal investigators and careful non-answers to concerned friends and business associates asking if we were okay. Desmond had recommended Dr. Leonie Prescott, 51 years old, with calm gray eyes and deliberate speech, a family trauma specialist who'd worked with his clients for over a decade. The waiting room smelled like lavender and old magazines. Delphina sat to my left, Ezra to my right, all 3 of us staring at different points on the beige wall. None of us had spoken since we'd arrived 15 minutes early. A door opened. Dr. Prescott stepped out, a professional and warm, without being intrusive. "Come in," she said. Her office was deliberately neutral, soft lighting, comfortable chairs arranged in a loose circle, no couch for lying on, like you see in movies. We sat. She settled into her chair and pulled out a simple notepad. "I've read the police report," she said, without preamble. "The news coverage, the federal complaint. So we don't need to spend time on what happened. I know what happened." I felt Delphina tense beside me. "What I'd like to know," Dr. Prescott continued, looking directly at me, "is—" The question caught me off guard. 1992. Your 10th anniversary, the year you gave her that pen. I opened my mouth, closed it. The answer wasn't simple. "I wish I'd noticed," I said finally, "that something was already wrong, that the person I thought I was married to wasn't real." "None of you need to perform healing for me," Dr. Prescott said gently. "Just be honest about the damage." We sat in silence for maybe 2 minutes. Then Ezra spoke. "I should have seen it," he said, his voice rough. "I was her son. She sent me those texts about her heart, and I just believed her. I didn't question. I didn't verify. I was manipulated because I wanted to be the good son." "And what does being a good son mean to you?" Dr. Prescott asked. "Loyalty, trust, not doubting your mother when she says she's sick, even when the evidence suggests otherwise." Ezra's hands clenched in his lap. "I put piety above judgment. That's how she got me." Delphina shifted in her chair. "I saw the numbers, the discrepancies, for months. I told myself there were explanations. I didn't want to believe my mother was stealing from my father's company. That's from our company, I corrected quietly. From our company, Delphina repeated. I let it go on longer than I should have because I didn't want to be the one who destroyed the family. You didn't destroy anything, Dr. Prescott said. You discovered a destruction that was already underway. How do you grieve a marriage that never existed in the first place? We spent the next hour talking, sometimes in circles, sometimes hitting on things that felt true and sharp and necessary. Dr. Prescott didn't offer easy answers or false comfort. She just listened, redirected when we got lost, and occasionally offered observations that cut deeper than I expected. At the end of the session, she leaned forward slightly. Here's what I want you to understand, she said. You didn't lose 35 years of happiness. You lost the illusion those 35 years were real. Those are very different things. Delphina wiped at her eyes. Ezra stared at his hands. I felt the words settle somewhere in my chest, where the grief had been living all week. The happiness you felt, some of it was real, Dr. Prescott continued. Your children's births, building the company, the good moments, those existed, but the framework around them, the marriage, the partnership, the trust that was fiction. Grieve the fiction, but don't let it erase the real parts. We left her office at noon, blinking in bright December sunlight. None of us spoke on the drive back to the office. By Friday of that same week, Ezra had made his decision. I found him at his desk in the project management office, packing his belongings into a cardboard box. Delphina stood nearby, her expression carefully neutral. Ezra, I said. I'm leaving, he said without looking up. Not fired, voluntarily. I need space to figure out who I am when I'm not being manipulated. You don't have to. I do, he interrupted gently. Dad, I was manipulated because I put piety above judgment, loyalty above critical thinking. I need to relearn using my head before my heart. I can't do that here. Watching my son pack his desk feels like watching him leave for college again, except this time, I am the reason he feels forced to leave. I watch as he places his engineering certifications in the box, followed by his project binders and the coffee mug Delphina gave him last Christmas. He left his hard hat hanging on the wall hook. Last item, the framed photo from his desk. The four of us, me, Nola, Delphina, Ezra, taken at the Henderson Plaza, groundbreaking 2 years ago. Everyone smiling, Nola's hand on my shoulder. Ezra stared at the photo for a long moment, then placed it face down in the box. You're always welcome back, I said. When you're ready. He nodded, picking up the box. I know. Delphina hugged him at the door. Call me every week. Ezra turned to me, setting the box down one last time. He extended his hand. I shook it, then pulled him into a hug instead. I'm proud of you, I said, for knowing what you need. I learned it from you, he said. Eventually, he picked up the box and walked to the door. Stopped, turned back. They see you on the other side, Dad. I didn't ask which side. I knew. The side where we stop pretending loyalty means silence. The side where family is built on truth instead of obligation. The side where my son becomes the man he needs to be, not the man his mother tried to make him. We'll see you there, I said. He left. The office felt emptier. Delphina stood beside me, both of us, watching the space where he'd been. He'll be okay, she said. I know, I said. We all will be, eventually. 3 years later, I stand at the fence line of an elementary school renovation site, watching my son build something honest. Ezra left Ellsworth Construction in late December 2025. For the first year I heard from him only through Delphina. He'd started working for a small residential contractor, learning the business from the ground up, despite having a decade of project management experience. Second year he called me once a month. Third year he opened his own firm, Ellsworth Remodeling and Repair. Small operation, 4 employees, clean books, honest bids, slow but steady growth. And now, December 2028, he's won the contract to renovate the auditorium and add 3 classrooms to Meadowbrook Elementary School in North Phoenix. I'm watching his crew frame the addition, and I can see everything he's learned in the precision of their work. It's checked the level twice, Ezra calls out to a young man on the ladder. We don't fix mistakes with excuses here. He learned that the hard way. Good. The young man adjusts the beam checks, the bubble level nods. Ezra moves to the next section clipboard and hand-marking measurements. He's wearing work boots and jeans, a company polo shirt with his business logo. Simple, professional, nothing flashy. He notices me standing at the fence and stops. Dad, he says, walking over. Didn't expect you here. Delphina mentioned you won the Meadowbrook contract. Wanted to see how it's going. He smiles, genuinely pleased. Going well. We're 3 days ahead of schedule, actually. Crew's good. Materials came in on time. I look past him at the construction site. Everything organized, clean, professional. You're doing good work, I say. He nods that quiet pride I recognize from looking in mirrors. Thanks. It means a lot coming from you. Watching him work is like watching a bone heal, slow and visible beneath the surface, but stronger at the break point. We stand there for a few minutes, father and son, separated by a chain-link fence and 3 years of necessary distance. He's different now, steadier, more confident in a way that doesn't need external validation. We actually beat Ellsworth Construction on this one. Ezra says almost shy about it. First time going head-to-head. School district put it out for bid, and we undercut you by 8%. 8% exactly. You earned it, I say. Your bid was solid. It felt good, he admits. Winning on merit, you know, not because of the family name or connections, just honest numbers and good work. I nod, keeping my expression neutral. What he doesn't know, what I'll never tell him, is that I reviewed the bid myself before Delphina submitted it. Saw the school district specs, saw Ezra's proposal come in at a reasonable price point that would give him a modest but sustainable profit margin. Saw how close it was to what Ellsworth Construction's bid would naturally be, and deliberately inflated ours by 8%. Not obvious, not charity, just enough to ensure his company would undercut us while still making it look like he'd simply bid smarter. I made sure Delphina used slightly higher material estimates, added buffer time to the labor hours, built-in contingencies we didn't really need. Ezra's bid was good, genuinely good. He would have been competitive regardless, but I made certain he'd win. And how's business otherwise? I ask. Steady, he says. Mostly residential right now, kitchen remodels, bathroom additions, that kind of thing. This is our first commercial job. If we do it right, could open doors to more school district work. You'll do it right. Yeah, he says quietly. I will. He doesn't know that Delphina provides free cash flow consulting on weekends, reviewing his books and helping optimize his margins without ever taking credit. Doesn't know she steers small commercial opportunities his way when Ellsworth Construction is too busy to take them. Doesn't know we've quietly built a support structure around him that looks like coincidence and good fortune instead of deliberate family protection. Some fathers leave money, some leave land. I'll leave him the belief he earned every inch on his own. I should get back to work, Ezra says, glancing at his crew. Want to grab dinner sometime this week? I'd like that. Good, I'll text you. He pauses at the fence. Thanks for coming by, Dad. Means something. I'm proud of you, I say. The company you've built, the man you've become. His eyes get a little wet. He nods, not trusting his voice, and heads back to the construction site. I watch him for another few minutes. Watch him check measurements, consult with his crew, solve small problems with quiet competence. 3 years ago, he walked away from Ellsworth Construction, carrying a box of belongings and a need to rebuild himself from honest ground. He did it, built something real, something that doesn't carry the weight of his mother's deception or his father's name or anything except his own integrity and skill. And if I helped make that possible by losing a bid, I could have won by creating space for him to succeed, by letting him believe he did it all himself. Well, that's a father's right. I turn away from the fence and walk back to my truck. The first Thursday of every month, we eat dinner under the Palo Verde tree. Not because anyone declared it a tradition, not because we sat down one afternoon and decided that healing required a schedule. It happened the way most real things happen in this family, quietly without ceremony, until one day you look around and realize it's simply who you are now. Delphina drove over the first Thursday after everything settled 2 weeks after the federal vehicle had rolled out of our driveway. She didn't call ahead. She just showed up at 6 o'clock with a container of her grandmother's rice, a bottle of red wine, and the look of someone who had decided that silence was no longer an option. Ezra arrived 20 minutes later, still in his work boots from his first week at the residential contractor's yard, carrying a bag of tamales from the place on McDowell. I had grilled chicken. None of us planned it. All of us needed it. We sat outside because the house felt different after everything, not haunted exactly, but rearranged in a way that interior rooms hadn't yet caught up to. The backyard had always been mine, more than hers. The flagstone patio, the fire pit, the workshop in the corner, where I still kept tools organized exactly the way my father taught me. The garden had been Nola's territory, and now it was bare ground and scorched soil where hybrid tea roses used to grow. We ate. We talked about practical things. Delphina's audit timeline, Ezra's new commute, the contractor forms I needed to file with the state. Necessary conversation, the kind that holds people together when deeper conversation still feels too raw. Before Delphina left that night, she paused near the empty garden bed and said without turning around, "You should plant something else here." "I know," I said. "And something that doesn't need so much attention," she added. That Saturday morning, I drove to the nursery on Thomas Road and spent 20 minutes talking to a young woman who knew more about desert plants than most people know about their own families. I told her I needed something hardy, something that would grow in difficult soil without requiring constant care. Something honest-looking. She laughed and I said, "Yes, actually, exactly that." She pointed me toward the Palo Verde in the corner of the lot, 3 feet tall, green-barked, already establishing a posture of quiet permanence. I bought it, brought it home in the truck bed, and planted it myself that afternoon, in the exact spot where the first rose pot had concealed a glass bottle full of forged invoices. I tamped the soil down around its roots, watered it, slowly stepped back and thought, this is what comes next. 3 years later, the tree stands nearly 8 feet tall. Its canopy has spread wide enough that the 3 of us fit comfortably beneath it at the simple outdoor table I built from reclaimed cedar last summer. The bark holds its color through winter. The roots, invisible and deep, have claimed their ground. It blooms yellow in the spring, small flowers, modest, nothing dramatic, and then settles back into steady green for the rest of the year. Tonight, the first Thursday of January, the garden lights have clicked on automatically by the time we finish the main course. The desert air carries that particular winter clarity that feels like a reward for surviving the heat, cool, clean, faintly scented with creosote. Delphina refills the wine glasses. Ezra stacks the plates without being asked the way he's done since he was 12 years old. We don't have an agenda for these dinners. That's the point. The work week gets agendas. These evenings get honesty. The Meadowbrook Auditorium passed final inspection. Ezra says settling back into his chair. Fire marshal signed off Wednesday morning. Building department closes out next week. On schedule, Delphina asks. 2 days ahead. He allows himself a small smile, the contained kind that means more than a wide grin would. The principal asked if we'd bid on the cafeteria renovation in the fall. Separate contract, larger scope. What did you say? I said we'd take a look at the specs and submit honest numbers. Delphina nods. The right answer. We've all learned the cost of other kinds of numbers. Ezra runs a 4-person operation now himself, a foreman named Garrett, who came up through union work, 2 craftsmen whose skill exceeds their preference for attention. He pays them fairly. His books are clean. His bids reflect actual cost. These facts don't sound remarkable until you understand the family we come from, what was done in the name of financial management under this roof, and what it cost us all to learn that legitimacy isn't a constraint. It's the foundation everything else rests on. I've watched him build his company the same way I watched him learn to frame walls at 16 methodically, with no shortcuts, checking his measurements twice, because fixing a mistake takes 3 times longer than not making it. The precision is his own. The patience came harder, but it came. Dad, Ezra says, "Can I ask you something?" Of course. He looks at the tree above us, tracing the line of a branch with his eyes before coming back to me. Do you ever wish you'd done it differently? Not this. He gestures vaguely at the table, the backyard, the rebuilt life. The confrontation, the evidence, the whole sequence. Do you wish you'd handled any of it another way? The question doesn't surprise me. Ezra processes by looking backward, mapping the decision points, understanding the logic, reconstructing the path. It's why he's good at what he does. Nothing in construction tolerates magical thinking. I wish I'd seen the signs earlier, I say. Not because it would have changed the outcome, but because I was living inside a comfortable story for too long. Comfortable stories are expensive. That's the thing nobody tells you. What would you have changed? Delphina asks. I would have asked more questions, I say. Not accusatory ones, just actual questions. Honest curiosity about the woman I lived with. I think I stopped being curious about her somewhere around the 15-year mark, and that's when the distance started. I filled that distance with assumptions. The assumptions were wrong. The tree moves slightly in the night wind. Something in the branches, a single leaf, catches the garden light and holds it for a moment before releasing. That she counted on that, Delphina says. She's not being cruel. It's just the kind of observation she makes precise, unornamented, accurate. She did, I agree. And for a long time, I gave her every reason to. This is what the monthly dinners have become, the place where we hold the complicated parts without flinching. We don't dramatize. We don't romanticize. We don't pretend the 35 years were uniformly corrupted, because they weren't. The children's births were real. The long mornings building the business from the ground were real. The pride at breaking ground on our first commercial project was real. Truth is rarely a single note. It's usually a chord, some tones harmonizing, some creating tension that only resolves later. What we learn to do is hold all of it at the same time, the genuine and the false, the love and the betrayal, without letting one erase the other. I planted this tree 3 days after the federal vehicle left. I say, I want you both to know why. They wait. This is another thing we've learned, that some things deserve to be said out loud plainly once. Because you can let an empty space stay empty and call it grief, I say. Or you can put something in the ground, something that doesn't require performance, doesn't demand constant management, just needs honest soil and enough sun and room to find its own form. I look at the tree. I needed to see what honest growth looks like. Needed a reminder that some things become stronger precisely because they don't need to be controlled. Ezra's hand rests on the table, and I set mine over it briefly, the way I did when he was young and frightened of something, and I wanted to communicate without words that the fear was survivable. Delphina raises her glass. No toast, no declaration, just the gesture. We're all 64 and 37 and 35 now, and none of us is the same person we were before, that first Monday in December when I stood at the bedroom window watching my wife bury something in the dark. We carry different knowledge. We've recalibrated what trust means, what loyalty requires, what family looks like when you strip the obligation away and leave only the choice. What remains is this 3 people who chose each other when they didn't have to, at a cedar table under a tree that asks nothing except to be allowed to grow. That is enough. It has always been enough. The garden lights stay on until 11. We talk until the wine is finished and the air grows cool enough for jackets. Then we carry the plates inside, say our goodbyes at the front door, and go our separate ways into the January night, each of us carrying something steadier than we arrived with. Same time next month, first Thursday, under the tree. And to you listening to my story, remember, this family betrayal cuts deeper than any wound you can see, but it also teaches you who you truly are. Looking back, I wish I'd seen the signs earlier. I trusted blindly when I should have asked questions. I let 3 decades of marriage convince me that betrayal was impossible. Don't make my mistake. Trust is sacred, but it shouldn't make you blind. When someone you love shows you who they are through their actions, not their words, believe them the first time. This family story taught me that loyalty isn't about ignoring the truth. It's about standing firm when everything falls apart. When family betrayal happens, you have a choice. Let it destroy you, or let it rebuild you stronger. I chose to protect what remained. I chose my children over my marriage. I chose honesty over comfortable lies. I believe God put me through this to show me what real strength looks like, not in keeping secrets, but in facing them. Every family story has pain. What matters is what you do with it. If this family story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you faced family betrayal? How did you handle it? Please share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about resilience, faith, and family, subscribe to this channel. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. It takes courage to listen to hard truths. Remember, some details in this story have been adjusted for reflection and storytelling, but the lesson about trust, strength, and choosing truth over comfort is real. God bless you.